Hi there, welcome to our latest episode of a Procurement Spotlight, where Fleur and I take a look at 6 news articles from the world of procurement in a completely unscripted approach. This is our second attempt at a Procurement Spotlight, and Fleur, how are you feeling about this?
Okay, still a bit unsure, anxious. I never know what either of us are going to come up with or what we're going to discuss, and not having a script is a bit strange. But it would be interesting to see what we talk about.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, then. So I'll go first with a domestic article that I came across recently. Then, so this one is coming from Inside Housing, and the article itself is about Fusion 21, who have recently appointed suppliers for a 1.5 billion decarbonisation framework. So again. For those of you that don't know, Fusion 21 are a framework provider predominantly operating with and supporting housing associations. I know them reasonably well from my time when I was working with housing associations. And essentially, this 1.5 billion decarbonisation framework has now been concluded, and it is a mammoth 4-year framework designed to help deliver zero carbon goals, reduce emissions, and support domestic and non-domestic retrofit measures. So very topical, I would suggest at the moment. Obviously all the news and what we're hearing in terms of zero carbon and net zero and the targets around those. But as I just mentioned, mammoth procurement exercise and framework itself. So the framework has 40, no less than 40 firms on it.
Wow.
So apologies in advance. I'm not going to do any shout outs for any of those. However, what is of interesting note is that 42% of them fall within the SME categorization, which I'm sure, Fleur, you were delighted to hear.
Mm.
So again, 42% of those 40 firms fall into the SME categorization. And how about this, Fleur? So the framework is ready to deliver projects funded by a variety of initiatives. Those initiatives being Warm Homes, Social Housing Fund, Wave 3, and the Public Sector Decarbonisation Scheme. The framework itself is split into 2 lots, one for whole house decarbonisation, and the second lot is for decarbonisation of public and educational buildings. So there's a nice split there in terms of the offerings across the 2 lots within the framework. Fleur, I've dropped you the link to the framework itself, so you can add it to the notes at the end on obviously the
Yeah, so
YouTube
they'll all be in
episode.
description anyway. But yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, excellent. So, like in a little bit of a running theme of all the articles that I've picked up this time around, I've tacked on a fun fact. So, I've got a fun
Gosh.
fact. So, a fun fact for you then. So, see how this one lands with you then. So, connected to net zero, and what I've come across from the website Energy UK. So, since 1990, Fleur, the power sector has reduced its emissions by around 79%.
Wow.
At the same time, in the UK, GDP has grown by 75%. So some impressive numbers there. However, I'm going to put that into plain English that's probably more understandable to the likes of you and I. So let's go with what I've found out here in terms of that by way of a comparison. So back in 1990, Fleur, a Big Mac cost £1.79, whereas today it is £5.9p. So there's your comparison
Mm.
in terms of 1990 to 2025. So
Okay. I haven't got any fun facts on mine, so just have to stick with the normal articles.
that's absolutely fine. So again, that's Fusion 21 framework, 1.5 billion
Yeah.
decarbonisation, and the article is from Inside Housing.
Excellent. So that's a really massive procurement and framework that's going to become available for use.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so mine for sort of follows on in terms of SMEs. So this was an article published by London Loves Business, and you have to apologise. Sorry for looking down. That's where I've got my notes. But
Yeah.
published by London Loves Business, and the title was around the Procurement Act must quickly deliver for SMEs. So it sort of starts with a key a key fact that only a fifth or 20% of procurement spend from the wider public sector, including central government, went to SMEs in 2024. So this information is according to the latest report that was published by the British Chambers of Commerce and data provider Tussle, which I've had experience of using myself in previous roles, and they were in partnership with technology firm AutoGen AI. So it talks around how public spending directly with SMEs has continued to grow. So it was 45.4 billion in 2024 compared to 42.4 billion in 2023. But they do note in it that the proportion of spending is quite, like, it doesn't change. It's quite in a rut. So it's sitting at 20%. So it was 19% in 2023 and 20% in 2019. So it's not necessarily changing much. It is worth noting that this report was published prior to the start of the Procurement Act being introduced in February 2025. And also, we now know that obviously the Procurement Act, as part of our discussions, has the words that we love to be saying, but have regard for SMEs. They also make reference to PPN 01, which is around where it's setting out with the new PPNs from the Procurement Act, setting out the requirement for all central government departments to set targets for direct spend with SMEs. And I think it's sort of getting at the point that there is a lot that the Procurement Act needs to be doing. Given that we now have a lot more focus or have regard to SMEs, we need to be considering SMEs as part of our procurement processes, how we can get them involved, how we can reduce barriers, which are all the things that we've been talking about as part of like the lead up to the Procurement Act going live. We need to have like a more streamlined and effective system, which should hopefully then benefit SMEs. And then I think it was sort of indicating in that they'll look to do another report to see, like, once the Procurement Act's been in place a bit longer, whether there's any changes or increases in that figure and spend that is going to SMEs. So one to sort of keep an eye on and watch and see what happens when we get like the next report in terms of whether that figure of spend with SMEs has increased.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the point that you made there, almost like the figure itself's kind of stagnated over recent times, right?
The spend's changed, but the percentages, but obviously the overall spend is going up and that spend's going up, but it's still like the same percentage proportion is staying the same.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, great article, and as you say, Fleur, another one for us to keep an eye on. So yeah, absolutely another one to, as we say, watch this space. Okay, then. So next article, and I think if memory serves right, Fleur, we agreed that was going to be our international one. So we'll hop outside of the UK then for a brief moment, and for my international article this time around, we are heading to the southern African country of Namibia, of all places, where in the leading national website called the Namibian, would you believe, recently were advised that the World Bank, who are an international financial institution that provide loans and grants to governments of low and middle income countries for the purpose of procuring capital projects, has recommended that Namibia introduce an end-to-end e-government procurement, as in brackets, EGP system to enhance, and now Fleur, you'll love this, increase transparency.
Okay.
So even Namibia are picking up on this trend. So a procurement expert from the World Bank has informed that whilst the existing platform that they have in Namibia is good, it is in fact insufficient. As you would believe, apparently less than 5% of public entities actually use it in Namibia. So they have a platform, but only around about, less than 5% public entities actually use it. Fleur, I sense you're freaking out inside by that news, and perhaps maybe you're about to, yeah, book flights over to Namibia as we speak. So, in the opinion of the World Bank procurement expert, a gentleman by the name of Devesh Mishra, the introduction of an end-to-end system would enhance transparency and generate substantial savings and revenue to sustain the public procurement system in Namibia. Essentially, in closing the EGP system, would do everything. I've done a little bit of research around this, but everything that we hear in the UK used by way of an e-procurement system. So I think obviously they're seeing behaviours. Sorry.
From start to finish, like start
Indeed.
procurement through to like your contract register, contract management.
Absolutely that. So I think, again, they're seeing what's taking place in the UK and other parts of the world, and they're recognising that there is real benefits in having an end-to-end e-procurement system. So I think that's a positive step, of course. And before I hand back over to you, Fleur, and just looking at my notes here again, I have yet another fun fact for you. Okay. I found out following my research that the name of the existing platform that's used in Namibia is actually called Portal Aerial. So shout out to any Disney fans that get that reference. So there you go. So that news coming out from the Namibian. And obviously referencing the appetite or instruction, dare I say, from the World Bank to actually look to improve their existing e-procurement solution.
That'd be interesting to see what they go for, see what the changes or differences it makes by having that in place.
Definitely.
Okay, so my international article, we are now traveling over to America. Okay. So it was all about Apple, so iPhones, which for me, yeah. It's Apple's India shift alters procurement strategy. So it's published by Procurement magazine, and is talking around how Apple is set to shift its manufacturing operations. So it's looking to shift production for US-bound products, so such as iPhones, from China to India and Vietnam. So it's all around like starting to consider the implications of the decision on their sourcing strategies. So obviously it's going to have an impact as to how they do things, but it's linked to like the geopolitical, cool, that's a word to say first thing in the morning, risks and punitive tariffs. So all about the tariffs that are being seen at the moment, and they're taking a closer look at their supply chain resilience, which is things that you should be doing as part of like your procurement processes and due diligence and stuff around your supply chain. So this will be like a large-scale transition covering procurement practices from a range of areas. They are anticipating that from June 2025, that they expect most iPhones sold in the US will have India as the country of origin, and Vietnam will be the country of origin for iPads, Mac, and Apple Watches, etc. So they're sort of splitting it out. And the main sort of reason for this is around managing risks associated with the like having production in one sort of location and too much risk with everything being in one place. So sort of similar things that we would consider as part of procurement processes, like, is everything going to one supplier? They're going to be able to cope in those type of things. So China will continue to be the country of origin for the vast majority of sales outside of the US. So this is definitely something that's just like US products. So anything like iPhones and stuff that are coming to UK or anything like that is still going to remain as it is. And it's sort of mentioned that in terms of the tariffs, they were potentially added an expected $90 million to June 2025 quarter costs. So quite significant impact in terms of the tariffs.
Yes.
And so at the moment, they're sort of in a period where they're trying to ensure the same higher quality remains in terms of the products that are being produced elsewhere to where they currently were in China. So that's quite interesting in terms of how they've taken a look at their supply chain and wanting to change things.
Yeah, definitely, and meet growing demands and what have you. It's interesting because, of course, you just mentioned about the tariffs, and I think everybody will remember that now. Infamous presentation that Donald Trump did when he got out a giant piece of card, and there was almost like a league table of nations in terms of those that were going to be hardest hit by the tariffs. And I think, very close to the top, if not at the top, were the countries that you just mentioned there. So China, India, and Vietnam. So as you say, it's going to be interesting to see how that develops and the impact of that going forward.
Yeah, another one to keep an eye on, but see what happens later down the line.
Absolutely. You say that about us, but the articles that we actually pick, they're always things that are ones for us to keep an eye on in the future. It's not something
I'll be saying that for the next one as well.
For sure, yeah. Okay, then. So for me, then it's back to the UK and my final article I found this time around to discuss. And this one is coming from Construction News. So the source point for this article is Construction News, where it discusses procurement set to begin on Ebbsfleet Central Infrastructure. Okay, so this is relatively short and sweet in terms of the information I found. So I've ended up having to do a little bit more of a deeper dive research elsewhere. So contractors can soon register their interest in the pertaining infrastructure works for the first phase of the Ebbsfleet Central Development in North Kent. This is part of the wider Garden City initiative. Okay. So, what is the project all about essentially? Well, so this will include things such as structures, clues in the title, highways, utilities, and landscaping works. The contract may be split into separate lots or awarded as a combined package. That's still being determined. However, I would assume that the procurement approach will start to become much clearer when the contractor engagement concludes on the 16th of June. I've got some further details around that in a moment. In addition to that, there is a webinar that's going to be going ahead on the 3rd of June. However, contractors are going to have to be pretty fleet of foot when it comes to registering to this session, as they need to be registered for that by the 23rd of May. So that's the webinar taking place on the 3rd of June. The end game for Ebbsfleet Central Infrastructure is to deliver up to 15,000 homes, 50 parks and open spaces, new public transport infrastructure, and major road improvements. So this is a huge project going on in Ebbsfleet.
These are sort of things that have been spoken about quite a bit in a number of different areas.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, again, a little bit more digging around for me, pun intended. It turns out that the early market engagement notice will be published on the 19th of May, and the estimated value for this project and all the activities that I've just referenced is around about £180 million. Okay, so that's that. And final fun fact, if you will, depends on your definition of fun. So about Ebbsfleet. So despite only having 6 platforms, its rail service include both high-speed rail services to both continental Europe as well as domestic services to London. And it opened back in 2007.
That's an interesting one. Be interesting to see. And I assume that's under the Procurement Act.
It is indeed, yes. Absolutely is.
So that sort of links very nicely into the next one that I have got. So obviously this is a domestic, so back to the UK. And this one is all about the post office. So something that has been in the news quite a lot recently, in that they have begun their procurement process for the Horizon replacement system. So, you know, this article was published by UK Authority. As we've sort of mentioned, it relates to the post office taking their initial steps towards the procurement process for replacing the Horizon system. I'm sure we have all heard about the Horizon system and the post office as part of, you know, focused on the documentary. It's been in the news a lot. And obviously the documentary won a BAFTA, and it's all the things that have been going, discussions through government and stuff like that. So we should all be aware of like where that currently is at the moment. But so far, the Post Office have published a planned procurement notice. So obviously it's under the Procurement Act. So in old terms, that would have been a PIN, but is now a planned procurement notice for a future contract with 2 lots for a replacement service provider and the EPOS system. So it's the provider and the system. The notice details that they're looking to have the contracts in place by July 2026, so next year. And the service provider lot has an estimated value of 322 million. So that includes VAT. And that is running or potentially going to run for 5 years with a possible extension of two more, so making it a 7-year contract. The EPOS system, so the EPOS lot, so the actual system is estimated at 169 million, including VAT. But this is going to run for at least 10 years with a possible extension of 2 more, so making it a potential 12 years for that lot. So this will be under the Procurement Act, as it's only just recently sort of been initiated. And from looking at the tender note or looking at the the planned procurement notice. The tender notice is to be issued or estimated to be issued around 30th of June 2025. So not very far away, really. It will be following a competitive flexible procedure, and a notice of details that it will be 70% quality and 30% cost. So there definitely is a focus towards quality of the service offering and the system. In terms of the process, there's a bit around the competitive flexible procedure that they're going to be following. So they're going to issue their PSQ, so their procurement specific questionnaire. And then the top 6 bidders from the obviously evaluation of that will be top 6 bidders for each lot will be invited to submit initial tenders. So then they'll have an initial tender stage. And then from that, they're going to they'll have the potential to hold dialogue where they're going to invite up to 4 or 5 if close scored bidders from each lot to have dialogue sessions with, and then they're going to have invitation to final tenders where they're going to submit their final tenders, and then that's going to be evaluated against the refined requirements. So they've already sort of indicated that there's potential to refine their requirements as well, which is something you can do because you've got those stages.
Yeah,
so that is going to be one to keep an eye on. It's very obviously quite highly political, got a high focus on it. In terms, and obviously it's been run under the Procurement Act as well. So a number of different factors combining all together. I think that is definitely, like I said, this is going to be one we're going to want to keep an eye on, especially when that tender notice comes out, to actually see how they're going to run their procurement process, especially as under competitive flexible.
Yeah, and they've set their stall out reasonably early. I mean, you talk about the end of June, really, in terms of the more tangible information coming out around this procurement exercise. But goodness me, Fleur, I don't say this often, but you think about procurement exercises, I'm not quite sure whether or not I'd actually want to be involved in it. Can you imagine
it's going to have a massive focus, isn't it?
Yeah.
In terms of the outcome, what's going to happen, that's going to be very highly watched by a number of people. In terms of
dread to think how many freedom of information requests they're going to get during this exercise and beyond. And as you say, that I think a lot of it is to do with the recently BAFTA award-winning documentary too. And it's really put this into the public focus. So what a great article to end on. Thanks for that, Fleur. That's brilliant.
All right. Okay, so that I think brings to an end this spotlight episode where we've covered 6 different articles that are in the procurement news at the moment. We hope you've enjoyed our discussions today. If you've got any news articles or anything like that you think are interesting, please do drop it in the comments. We'd love to see what ones you think we should talk about. And also, if there's anything you'd like us to talk about in any future videos, whether it's the spotlight or our procurement power play videos, please also let us know in the comments, and we can look to incorporate those going forwards. As ever, if you have liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. It would really help us grow, and we'd love to have you as part of our procurement community. So we will end this video here, and we will see you in our next spotlight video.